Tariff is a tax on goods entering a country, making those products more expensive for buyers. In 2025, President Donald Trump announced sweeping new tariffs, claiming other countries were treating the U.S. unfairly in trade. His plan, a 10% baseline tariff on nearly all imports, with even higher rates for certain products and countries. For example, semiconductors faced a 100% tariff, and goods from India a 25% tariff due to their oil purchases from Russia. Trump argued these tariffs would protect American jobs and generate over $150 billion for the government, possibly funding tax cuts. He called it reciprocal trade, matching other countries' tariffs to force fairer treatment for U.S. goods. Many supporters cheered, believing global trade had hurt American workers. But critics warned the tariffs would raise prices on everyday items, from phones to food, since so many products are imported or use foreign parts. Higher costs would likely be passed on to consumers, making life more expensive for families. Experts cautioned that the plan could backfire, hurting both businesses and shoppers. The debate quickly became a national flashpoint, dividing Americans over the best way to protect jobs and manage trade. Trump's tariffs set the stage for a major legal and political battle. Would these new taxes help American workers, or would they spark economic pain at home? The answer would soon be tested in the courts and in the court of public opinion. The stakes, the future of U.S. trade policy, and the limits of presidential power. The country braced for a showdown. Trump's tariffs didn't go unchallenged. American companies quickly sued, arguing the president lacked the authority to impose such sweeping taxes alone. They pointed to the Constitution, which gives Congress, not the president, the power to set taxes and regulate trade. The administration relied on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, claiming national emergencies justified the tariffs. But IEEPA was designed for targeted actions, not broad economic policy. Businesses argued the emergencies cited, like drug trafficking, had little to do with most imports being taxed. Lower courts agreed, ruling that Trump had overstepped his authority, and that IEEPA didn't allow for such tariffs. The administration appealed, keeping the tariffs in place while the case moved up the legal ladder. The fight was now headed for the Supreme Court, with billions of dollars and the balance of power at stake. Would the president's emergency powers be enough to reshape trade policy? The answer would define the limits of executive authority for years to come. The nation waited for the highest court's decision. At the Supreme Court, the central question was clear. Can a president use emergency powers to impose massive tariffs without Congress? Government lawyers argued the president needed flexibility to protect the economy from foreign threats, and that IEEPA's broad language allowed it. They insisted trade deficits and unfair competition were national security issues. Business lawyers countered that the Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to tax and regulate commerce. They warned that letting the president use IEEPA this way would erase vital checks and balances. Some justices questioned whether Congress ever intended to give one person such sweeping authority. The debate was about more than tariffs. It was about the structure of American government. The justices' decision would set a precedent for the limits of presidential power. The country watched, knowing the outcome would shape the future of trade and executive authority. In late 2025, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 against President Trump's tariffs. The court declared that using IEEPA to impose broad tariffs was unconstitutional. The power to tax and regulate trade belongs to Congress. The majority opinion said the emergencies cited weren't directly connected to the tariffs, and the law wasn't meant for sweeping economic changes. The ruling immediately halted the new tariffs and set a clear limit on presidential authority. Trump denounced the decision as political, vowing to keep fighting for his trade agenda. Legal experts called it a landmark case, reaffirming the separation of powers. The decision sent shockwaves through Washington and the business world. It was a major defeat for the administration and a victory for those defending congressional authority. The precedent would shape future debates over executive power. The ruling didn't just stop the tariffs, it redefined the boundaries of presidential action. The nation now faced the challenge of refunding billions already collected under the block tariffs. The Supreme Court's decision sent financial markets soaring. Investors breathed a sigh of relief as the threat of a trade war faded. The Dow Jones jumped, signaling renewed confidence in the economy. For businesses, especially importers, the ruling was a huge win. No sudden cost spikes, no layoffs, and no price hikes for consumers. Retailers and small businesses celebrated, saying the decision protected American families from billions in new taxes. But not everyone was happy. Industries like steel and aluminum, which hoped tariffs would shield them from foreign competition, felt betrayed. Union leaders warned the ruling would cost American jobs in manufacturing. Meanwhile, the government faced a logistical nightmare. Billions in tariffs had already been collected and now had to be refunded, with interest. Processing those refunds would take months, if not years. The decision exposed deep divides in the economy, between importers and manufacturers, consumers and workers. It also highlighted the complexity of trade policy in a globalized world. The ruling brought relief to many, but left others searching for new ways to compete. The debate over how best to protect American jobs was far from over. The Supreme Court's decision was a turning point, but not the end of the story. The economic fallout would ripple for years. The Supreme Court's ruling echoed around the globe. European and Asian leaders welcomed the decision, seeing it as a win for stable, rules-based trade. The European Union and allies like Japan and Canada praised the U.S. for upholding legal checks on executive power. China, a main target of the tariffs, called the ruling proof of U.S. policy instability, and urged a return to predictable trade relations. Brazil's president called it a moment of sanity, shelving plans for a coordinated response to U.S. tariffs. In Washington, reactions split along party lines. Democrats and some Republicans praised the court for defending the Constitution, while Trump's allies called the decision out of touch with American workers. The fight over trade policy shifted from the courts back to Congress. The world watched to see if the U.S. would pursue cooperation or renewed conflict. The ruling eased fears of a global trade war, but the underlying tensions remained. America's role in the world economy was still up for debate. The next chapter would be written in Congress, not the courtroom. For everyday Americans, the Supreme Court's decision meant no sudden spike in prices for essentials like food, clothing, and electronics. Families avoided a costly new tax, and businesses could plan without fear of sweeping tariffs. Trump's promise of using tariff revenue for tax cuts evaporated, complicating his economic agenda. The ruling was good news for industries relying on imports, but disappointing for those hoping tariffs would protect their jobs. The decision brought stability and predictability to the economy. It clarified that major trade changes must go through Congress, not just the White House. For most people, it meant less chaos and more certainty about the cost of living. The debate over trade would continue, but under clearer rules. The 2025 tariff showdown underscored the importance of checks and balances in American government. The Supreme Court reaffirmed that no president can unilaterally reshape the economy. Congress must have a say. Going forward, any major trade policy will require negotiation and compromise in Congress. New legislation may further limit executive power over tariffs. Globally, the ruling reassured allies but reminded the world that U.S. trade policy remains deeply divided. The debate over protectionism versus free trade is far from settled. The ruling ensures future trade battles will be fought through lawmaking, not executive fiat. America's approach to the global economy will keep evolving, shaped by both politics and principle. The lesson the Constitution's framework endures even in turbulent times. The power to change the nation's economic course remains a shared responsibility.